Welcome back to Kidsplaining. My name is Daniel, and in this video we are once again talking about Quests of Yore from the op who helped sponsor this video. Quests of Yore is a role-playing game based on the movie Onward from Pixar. If you've seen that movie, you're going to recognize a lot of stuff in it. Now, something really fun about this is Barley's edition. Barley, one of the main characters in that movie. The story behind this, he helped design it. He put this together for you so you could go on a quest, which is why there are pieces of notebook paper and stuff duct taped inside all of this. There's Cheeto handprints. Love it. It's perfect. So this is part 2 of a series that I'm doing called A Parent's Guide to Being a Questmaster. In part 1, we talked about why you should play Quests of Yore, why you should give this a chance, and why you as a parent should take on the helm of Questmaster for your family and what it means to be a Questmaster. So now it's time to talk about how you're going to do this. And this isn't going to be a get through everything as fast as you can video. I know there are people watching who are in the same place I was. You are totally out of your element. You've never played an RPG before, and you don't really know what you're doing. So my goal is by the end of this, you are going to know how to do all of the stuff you need to do as a Questmaster. You're going to understand the mechanics of it. So I'm not going to rush through and just try and make this as short as possible. I really want you to understand this. And as we go through this and you watch this video, remember, before playing this game, I had never done this before. I had never played Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played an RPG. Everything that I know is from these 2 books and what's in this box. And it's going to seem really complicated when you first look at it. It's going to be daunting. There's a long rule book. There's this Tome of Quests, all of that. But the way that they put this together is so helpful. As you go through the Tome of Quests, it's going to walk you through everything new that you encounter. The first time you battle, the first time you have to go through a trial, it's going to tell you as the Questmaster what to do. There's a lot of hand-holding early on. You're not expected to read the entire player's guide or watch this video and just retain all of the knowledge that's in there. It really helps you out. So as we go through this video, I'll leave time codes for everything down in the description. So if you need help with something specific like creating dice pools or going through a trial, you can jump straight to that part of the video. So let's get started. The most important rule when you are playing Quests of Yore is to make sure that you're having fun. That's the most important rule. There's no high score to beat. There's no best time to get. This is a role-playing game. There's no board. There's no hard and fast rules. Your goal is to complete the quest successfully. You are guiding your players through that. If they fail, you can regroup and try again. If they get hung up on a rule and everyone's waiting for you as the Questmaster to tell them what to do, just wing it and go find the right rule later. It is more important to keep the game moving and keep everyone having fun than it is to get down into the nitty-gritty rules. Your role, again, is to keep it moving, and you have tons of flexibility in that. So just use your best judgment and your discretion as the game moves along. So one thing that I do want to clarify before we go further is this is the Tome of Quests. This is the storybook that you're going to be reading through, that you as the Questmaster are going to be using to guide your players through the quest. You are the only person that should read this ever at any point. No other player, no one other than the Questmaster should ever crack open this book and read it. It is filled with all the spoilers. Now in this video, we're going through a little bit of this. We're going to show some examples, mostly from the prologue, which is really the training. So if you're not the Questmaster, you can still watch this video. You might get a little bit of a peek into, again, the prologue, but we're not going to give away any major spoilers of this. But outside of this video, no one other than the Questmaster should ever read the Tome of Quests. Now you also have the Advanced Player's Guide, which is the rule book. Like we said in the last video, there is no basic player's guide. This is it. You really only, before you play the first round, need to read the first couple chapters. That's going to go through a lot of what we're going through in this video. So when you're done with this, go read the first 2 chapters and hopefully you'll have a pretty good grasp of what's in it. So now that we got that out of the way, we're going to look at what's in the box. You have your Questmaster shield. It's pretty cool art on the back, but this is basically just a big reference card for you. It shows the challenge targets, it shows maximum dice for reputation levels, it shows assists and stuff like that. All of this will make sense as we go along, so don't worry about needing to understand all of this yet. Then we have the miniatures. The Manticore and the Dragon are for characters in the story. They're not playable characters. But then these 4 characters will be used to represent your players when there's a conflict. Other than that, they're not really used during play. Same with the hexagon tiles and the player and enemy tokens. Those are only used for challenges, and the tome tells you exactly how to set them up when it's time. But basically, because there's no board that you're going through, these are used just to give players a spatial representation so they know, like for ranged attacks, how many spaces away they are from something. Next, you have these dice. You have a D4 through a D12 in the 3 different colors, blue, red, and green. Each color represents one of these 3 spots on the character sheet, and whenever a character has to do an action, you as the quest master will build them a pool of dice based on their unique characteristics, again, that you're going to find here in the approach, assist, and technique area of their character sheet. You also have the Runic wheel, which is this 20-sided dice. This is for you as the quest master to roll anytime something is up to pure chance. This doesn't get used often, you're not going to use it a lot, but basically you have a scale of 1 to 20, 1 being terrible and 20 being amazing. And anything above 10 is considered a favorable outcome. Now, sometimes you're going to have different things in the Tome of Quests that's going to say like they need to roll between a 3 and an 8 to get this. But if it's not just a good or bad outcome, the tome is going to tell you what they need to roll. So don't worry about that. It'll typically tell you when to use this. Or if there's something, again, we talked about ad-libbing. If someone wants to just sprint across something instead of like trying to disable a trap, you can pick a number on the Runic wheel and just do a chance roll for that. Then we have these tokens. We have Grit, Heart's Fire, and Lion's Will. Grit is basically just health. If someone gets tired, hurt, discouraged, they may lose grit. Everyone starts with 5 at the beginning of each quest, and there's going to be opportunities to regain grit during a quest if needed. And remember, it's flexible. So if you have a player that's low on grit and you don't want them to get discouraged, you as the quest master can give them a silly little challenge, have them roll some dice or something. You can give them grit back along the way. You don't want to just kind of let them, like, you don't want to make it too easy. You don't want to just let them get grit back right in the middle of a battle. But if they go through a battle and they're pretty hurt, maybe they can explore for some herbs off the side of the path or something that can help them heal, or they can stop and see if they can kind of find something to eat that can regain some grit. You have that option and that flexibility as the quest master. Now, Heart's Fire is an adventurer's inner reserves that they draw on to do something difficult. Mainly this is going to be used when you're casting spells and producing magic. Some cards will tell you that they cost Heart's Fire, and if a player is out of Heart's Fire, they can't use those actions. And then Lion's Will is basically a one-time reserve of inner greatness that each player starts every quest with. They have 1 and they can spend it to get better dice or re-roll dice, or if they need to do some other extraordinary action. Now, the rules suggest that you have players do something to earn the right to use a Heart's Fire. Again, it's up to your discretion as the quest master. There's some great ideas in the back of there. Maybe have them do a little silly challenge or do something, hop on 1 foot or something like that. There's a lot of stuff. And again, it's all meant to be fun and silly. It's not, this isn't a serious, like, hardcore RPG game of Dungeons and Dragons that you have to get exactly right. Have fun with it. But, again, and there's a lot in this video that we're kind of just leaving you to find in the Advanced Player's Guide. Not a lot, but there's some things that we're not covering just because they get too nitpicky for this video. But there's a great appendix and reference in the back if there's ever there's a glossary in the back of the player guide. So if you ever wonder what fortune is or how to use grit, you can look it up in the back of the player's guide and it will tell you what page to go to. It is super helpful. So next, there's these cards. There's items, there's spells, there's weapons, there's accessories, and these are all things that your adventurers can take with them on the quest. And there's also ally cards that are going to be used during certain quests to represent another character that's joining your group for a short time. But again, the tome is going to tell you when to add them and how to handle their character during the quest. Kind of if there's any special instructions, if they need to be protected, if they can do certain things, that's all going to be laid out very clearly, either in the tome or on the ally card. The icons on the item, spell, and weapons cards will tell you who can use them and how to use each card. This dice icon is the minimum reputation level that can use this card. So this shows a D4, which means that a novice or above can use it. Pretty much anybody. And over here we have the suggested techniques for using this card. And we're about to talk about techniques, so that'll make sense in just a second. We'll talk more about the cards and how to use them and all what the stuff on them means in just a minute. But first I want to talk about the character sheets and dice pools, because that's going to make everything about the icons on the cards makes a lot more sense. The back of the character sheet is all for flavor. Your players can draw a picture of their character. They can take notes of special bonds, things that happen, stuff like that. The front is the part that you're going to use for the actual gameplay. This bottom section shows your reputation. Everyone starts out as a novice, and then after each quest, you're going to level up by 1. So after the prologue in quests 1, 2, and 3, your players will level up from a novice to a wanderer. And then these dice symbols next to each reputation correspond with the cards. So a novice shows a D4. That means a novice can't use any item cards higher than a D4. So when it's time to gear up, you can just set aside all of the cards that they can't use so there's no confusion. And speaking of gearing up, your players need to do this before each quest. The character sheets are specific to the type of character. This one is a defender. It says it right there. And it says at the top left the cards that character can carry. So this character can carry a weapon, a shield, a large weapon or a ranged weapon, an armor, and an artifact or a tool. And each type of character, the wizard's going to be different than the defender. And so each type of character is going to have a specific thing that they can do. But even if you create your own character, you are going to use a character-specific sheet. So it's going to tell you what you can carry and what types of things you can carry. So at the top of the sheet, it shows the player's heart's fire, their grit, and their lion's will. This is where players will track their maximum amount, because as you go through the game, you're going to be able to have more grit, more heart's fire, things like that. And also, if you have to take a break in the middle of a quest, they can write down how much of each of these they have so that when you start back, you know where to start. Use a pencil for this, not a pen, because they're going to have to erase, and if you use a pen, it's just going to get messy. So now onto the heart of each character and how they're going to actually do stuff as you play. Your main actions involve approaches and techniques. And the dice icons next to each item represent what dice a player will use when they're using a specific action, and they will always use the highest dice that's colored in. Approaches are how a player will actually approach a situation. Bravely is for bold actions like a sword fight. Cleverly is for skilled things like picking locks. Patiently is something you have to focus on, like if you're hidden in the woods and you're trying to line up a shot with your bow, that would be a patiently action. Quickly is quickly. You're reacting to something. Bandits jump out of the woods and attack you and you have to react. That is a quickly action. And socially is an interaction with other people or other characters. If you have to convince someone to help you along the way, that's going to be a socially action. Then you have techniques, and we are not going to go through all of these, but they're all different techniques player can use to do an action, and the player's guide gives a detailed description of what each of these means. So aim would be for using a bow or a ranged weapon, or it could be throwing something at someone. Fight would be a sword fight. Exert is athletic feats like running, jumping, climbing. And then you have 2 magic techniques, casting and wielding. Wielding is using magic to fight, and casting is using magic any other time that's not fighting. So I just want to touch on those 2 because that can get confusing. So now that we have this kind of explained, let's talk about forming dice pools, because this is how players actually execute actions during a quest. So when it comes time to do an action, your adventurer, your player will tell you what they're going to do, you being the quest master. And then you're going to form a dice pool based on their specific attributes. So let's use this character as an example. Let's say Ashel is hidden in the woods and there's an enemy out in the field. You ask your adventurer, what do you want to do? And they may say that they want to run out there all willy-nilly and get into a sword fight. That action seems to be appropriate for bravely and for fight. So you would give them a blue D8 for their bravely and a red D6 for their fight. Now, one of the biggest struggles we ran into is the tendency for players, especially early on, to play the mechanics over playing the story, which means that instead of describing what they wanted to do, I would lay out the scenario and Peyton would say, okay, I want to patiently aim and shoot them with my bow. And I would have to step back and say, no, you need to tell me what you're going to do. Describe your actions, and then I'll decide what dice you get. So then they would say they're going to take out their bow and line up their shot, but they're going to stay hidden in the woods so they don't get seen. And then I would give them a patiently aim dice because that was the right action, but they need to get into the story. They need to use their imagination. It's about keeping them in character, visualizing the situation and using their imagination. They don't need to tell you they're going to go cleverly investigate to look for traps. They need to describe looking around whatever it is, the log, the door, the floor, searching for anything that might be out of place. And then you're going to give them a dice pool to see if they find anything. So this has been the hardest part for us, again, because we're totally new to this. We've never done the RPG thing before. So this has been the most difficult thing, is just keeping everyone engaged in the story world, not just looking at a set of actions, but keeping the imagination going. It's really easy to default to, okay, I need to fight this guy, give me a blue D8 and a red D6. But it's your job as the quest master to keep pushing them back into character. And the more you do that, the more natural it becomes for them and for you. And while we're talking about this is a good place to talk about the exchange, which is where the story comes to life. This is the conversation, the narration. This is where characters discuss what they can do and what they want to do. The tome might tell you that the characters are in the Manticore's tavern eating breakfast, and then you leave the adventurers to discuss what they're doing, what's going on around them. It's the world building in their minds. It's the scene setting. It's the imagination. And then the tome might give you, the quest master, a set of information that you can tell them if they ask, but you're not supposed to volunteer unless they actually ask. So you have to get them to ask. Again, this is awkward at first, but the more you do it, the more immersive the experience is and the more fun you'll have playing. And the tome is going to guide you, the quest master, through this process. Now let's talk about assists. That's what the green dice are for. You can get assists from an appropriate item card, in which case the player just uses the dice shown on the card. So if you're going to use a short sword when you're battling, you're going to use a D4. And when I say an appropriate item card, I mean that it matches the action. If you're bravely fighting, a compass is not the right item to bravely fight with, unless your character gets really creative and says that's all they have and they want to throw it and see if they can hit someone in the eye, in which case, probably going to roll this because that's pretty chancy. But aside from that unique situation, a sword is going to be better. So someone wants to use their short sword in a fight, they're going to use a D4. You can also get an assist from another player, in which case the assisting player is going to form a dice pool using the same actions as the active player. If the active player is about to patiently aim, then the assisting player forms a dice pool for their patiently aim attributes. Then they roll those dice, and based on what they get, that determines how much they assist. And the table inside your shield shows all of the support and assist results. So again, just to make it clear how we're going to do this. So let's say that one player is getting ready to patiently aim at something, and Ashel wants to assist on that. So Ashel patiently is a D6. So we would give Ashel a blue D6, and then aim is also a D6. So Ashel would take these two dice. Ashel rolls the dice. Ashel gets a 5. So we refer now to the support table, which says that if he rolls a 5 to 7, he assists by 1. So when the active player rolls these dice, they're just going to add 1 to their result. So if they roll a 7, it would be an 8. If they roll 4 or less, it's going to be a 0. If they roll an 8 to 10, it's going to be a D4. And whatever the assist dice is, you just add one of these green dice to their dice pool. So assists are, again, it's kind of weird at first, but you'll get used to it. So the last thing we need to talk about before we dive into the Tome of Quests and actually get into all of that is the cards and what all the icons mean. Remember, this dice icon shows the minimum reputation level that can use the card. It also represents the assist die that someone would get when they use it. Over here, we have the suggested techniques for the card, and these numbers inside the circle are how far away this item can be used when there's a fight during a quest. You're going to be setting up the hexagon tiles to represent the battle, so this number is how many tiles away it can be used. So in this case, if a player is using the aim technique, they can use it from 4 spaces away. But if they're up close and want to use the brawl technique, they're too close to shoot, so you just hit them with the crossbow. They have to be on the same tile to do that. Some cards, mainly spells, show a Heart's Fire up in this area, and that's the cost of Heart's Fire to use the spell. So this spell would cost the player 2 Heart's Fire to cast. This little arrow icon means they get to shift up their dice. So in this case, they use 1 dice level higher than their aim says. So if they're normally a D8, this card would let them use a D10. And when they're shifting up, they can go above their reputation level, but that's the only time that someone can roll above their reputation level, unless it's a Lion's Will or some special situation like that. But other than that, they can shift up out of their reputation level, but they can't they can't assist above their reputation level. The card will also usually tell you what techniques or approaches to use with it, and sometimes it's going to tell you both. So you would use Patiently Investigate with this guide card, and the Unicorn Spear says that if you're fighting with it, you would shift up your red fight dice, and if you're using this to defend yourself against an enemy who's using the Wield technique, you would shift up your defense dice. And remember, these icons at the bottom show which character types can carry this card. These icons can be confusing at first, but once you get a couple of quests under your belt, it's going to make sense and it's going to be easier to use and to quickly use items, use assists, things like that. So now it's time to look at the Tome of Quests. This is your guide as you lead your adventurers. Each quest is its own chapter, and there are 4 types of text in this book. Normal text outside of a box informs you as the questmaster of what's going on in the story. And the yellow box text is going to give you, the questmaster, instructions or tell you something you need to understand before you proceed. And you never, ever read normal text or text in a yellow box out loud. You only read blue or green box text out loud. The blue box text is instructional or tutorial information for the players, and the green box text is the story. So a typical quest will have a block of text that will prepare you as the quest master. Then it's going to have story text that you need to read to the group, and then instructions on how to guide your players through the next steps. The plain text may also be information that the group needs to ask you in order to know. So in this quest on page 21, a young Styre girl is coming to the tavern looking for help. Ideally, the adventurers will ask her questions and not just ignore her. And all of this over here is information that you can give them if they ask questions. If they don't, you may want to give them a nudge to ask the Styre girl questions, but you don't want to just volunteer this information. Again, part of your job is to push them to stay in character and to use their imagination. Once you feel that they've gotten what they need to proceed, which isn't everything, you don't have to give them all the information, but you need to feel out what they're going to need to kind of do their job on their adventure. And again, the tome is going to guide you and give you more instructions as you go. But once they have what they need, you're going to read more of the story out loud. And then you're probably going to come across a challenge at some point. And I just want to point out again, the tome does a really good job of walking you as the quest master through any new situations. Anytime a new situation arises, especially early in the game, it's going to tell you exactly how to handle that and what to tell the other players and what your role as the quest master is in the process. For example, the first time you have to use dice, it gives you this great chart that tells you exactly how to form an action pool. And then when players are presented with a choice, it guides you through if they choose to go right, if they choose to go left, whatever that choice is, it guides you through helping them make that choice and what to do with each decision. Again, there is a lot of hand-holding in this book early on, and it is so helpful. So back to challenges. Challenges look like this. You have the title, a description, and then the suggested targets, and there may be some additional instructions at the bottom. Targets are what a player needs to roll to beat the challenges, and some challenges are going to tell you exactly what approach to use. This one tells you that to disable the trap, you need to use the mend technique, which is shown by this anvil icon. And most likely that would be a patiently approach, since you're carefully looking for a trap. That's not going to be a quickly, that's going to be a patiently. So Ashel has a patiently D6 and a mend D4. In actual gameplay, I would suggest seeing if another player is better suited for this action, but we'll still go with Ashel. So he needs to roll a combined total of 8 to disable this trap. And if he does, then he can cross the bridge safely. This also has another option, and that's that the adventurer can try to cross without disabling the trap. Let's say your player thinks that they can just sprint across and they're fast enough to make it before the trap triggers. They're taking a chance, so you would roll the runic wheel, and it says if they get between a 3 and an 8, they can cross safely. Otherwise, they fall in the water and they're probably going to lose 1 grit. And when you get into a trial with an enemy, it looks pretty similar. You have the title and the description, but you also have the enemy's grit and then their suggested targets. And if it's a fight, the tome will also give you a diagram for setting up the hexagon tiles, which you can see right here. The purpose of the tiles is to help players visualize where things are happening and for determining distances with ranged attacks. So in this case, we're going to set up the tiles like this, and then it also shows the skull icons, and that's where you put the matching enemy tokens with the lighter side face up. The token colors match up to the colors in the enemy's description, which also tells you how much grit they have. So you also need to put grit with each enemy so you can track their health. And the green spaces show where the players can start, and they don't all have to be in the same space, and in fact, they probably shouldn't be. And this is where the minis come in. So you'll lay this out, put the enemies out where it says, give them their grit, and then describe the situation as you're directed to in the Tome of Quests, and then everyone will choose where they're going to start. So in this case, I have my enemies here, and I have my characters here, which lines up with this diagram right here. So now we're back to the enemies. You have the enemy's name, what color they are, which corresponds with the tokens you just set up on the tiles. You have a short description of the enemy, and then their suggested targets. When a suggested target says attacks, these are the different ways that the enemy can attack a player and what the player needs to roll to defend the attack. This icon means it's a ranged attack, and the number is how many spots away they can attack from. So the crossbows can attack from 3 spots away with a ranged attack, and it would take an 8 to defend it. Or if they want to get up close, then the enemy could attack with a brawl technique, and it would only take a 6 to defend it. And the part where it says defending, that's the enemy defending a player's attack. So a player needs to roll an 8 to successfully attack, unless they attack with a brawl or a fight attack. Then they only need to roll a 6 because the crossbows are really weak up close. So let's look at a player being attacked by a crossbow. In this case, you might describe the crossbow firing, arrow flying through the air towards Ashel. What are they going to do? Well, they tell you that they see the arrow and they're going to dive out of the way to avoid it or jump behind a tree, and you would likely determine that these are both quickly exert actions. You would give them the appropriate dice, and if they roll an 8, then they dodge it, and if they roll less than an 8, they weren't quick enough and the arrow gets them, so they're going to lose some grit. And this is a good time to talk about the risky actions chart here that you will see inside of your shield. When someone is doing something dangerous, anytime, it's a risky action and there's a risk of getting hurt. So whether they're fighting or climbing or something like that, it's a risky action. And a player is going to roll to see how successful or unsuccessful they are at that action. So this top row shows the difference from the target. Let's say a player is attacking an enemy with a target of 8. If they roll exactly an 8, then both the player and the enemy will lose 1 grit. The better they roll, the more they hurt the enemy, and the worse they roll, the more they hurt themselves. So if your target is 8 and they roll a 6, that probably means they tripped over their sword and got poked. So they're going to lose 2 grit. Now, if they roll plus or minus 5, that means they rolled fortune or ruin, respectively. When this happens, they need to be rewarded or punished for all of their actions, and it's up to the quest master to determine what those rewards or punishments are. But the shield has some suggestions over here on the side to get you started. So maybe fortune during attack, all that hard work developing pinpoint accuracy is paying off, you inflict 1 more grit loss. And ruin during an attack, your attack would be incredible if you were the target. You suffer 1 grit loss. So you as the quest master really have a lot of discretion in what the fortune or the ruin reward or consequence is. Maybe if they roll fortune, if they roll a great roll during attack, maybe you say, hey, that was great. You knocked them off their feet. They fell down. They weren't able to attack right away. So you have time to attack again. So roll another attack. And maybe they get another turn right after their turn. Stuff like that. So it's your job as the quest master to figure out how to reward them based on the specific situation that they're in anytime they roll fortune, and how to punish them anytime they roll ruin. Now, the last thing you need to know about trials is how they actually play out. Trials are played over rounds, and each round, everyone, including the enemies, gets 1 turn, and whoever's turn it is gets to decide who goes next. Usually the tome will tell you whether the adventurers, the enemies, will attack first. Maybe if there's a group of bandits surprise attacking you from the woods, obviously they're going to go first. It'll also tell you, at least early on, whether all of the enemies should go back to back or whether they would take turns attacking. Once a player or enemy takes their turn, they turn over their little marker. For enemies, it's the skull on the board. And for players, it's this little yellow marker that they have with them. This shows that they've gone that round. And then once everyone is gone, turn the markers back over and start the second round of fighting exactly the same. And remember, when kind of encourage players as they're deciding who goes next, it's really easy to say, hey, let's all just go and attack really fast. But when you do that, all the enemies are going to attack back to back too, and you don't have a chance to respond because you've already used your turn that round. So just keep that in mind during attacks. Again, that's advice straight out of the Tome of Quests. It's going to hold your hand early on. So each turn, players or enemies can take 2 moves during their turn. They can attack, they can interact with something, they can support or assist another player, they can travel where they move up to 2 hexes, and they can use something, which means a spell or a card or something like that. So 2 important things there. If a player assists another player, that is one of their moves, and they need to take their turn immediately after the other player that they assisted. And using an item is also one of your moves. So you couldn't use a sword to attack an enemy and then move. Using the item and attacking are each one move, so you don't have another move available to actually travel across the board. And again, the first time you get into this situation during a quest, the tome is going to walk you through all of this. And when the trial is over, assuming your group was successful, you continue the quest. Just read the next part in the Tome of Quests and do whatever it says until you get to the end of the quest. And once you complete an entire quest, your group gets to level up their reputation and choose 1 technique to increase, keeping in mind that they cannot exceed their maximum level, which is shown above the reputation level here. So a novice can never go above a D8, neither can a wanderer, adventurers can go up to D10, and champions can use anything. And if you fail at a quest, meaning everyone runs out of grit, then the players retreat to safety and regroup, and they start the quest over, but at least this time they'll have the knowledge of their failures to help them succeed next time, hopefully. And that has happened to us. We have not successfully completed every quest on the first try, so we went back and everyone approached the quest a little bit differently, tried some different things that actually worked out really well. It kind of made them go back and think creatively about how to get through the hard stuff that they did before. And they came up with some really unique solutions to complete the quest and the objectives they had to do. So I know this isn't like everything you're going to need to know. I didn't go into every detail in the player's guide, but this should be enough to get you started. And you really do need to read through the first 2 chapters of the player's guide before your first quest. Once you have a couple of quests under your belt, you may want to check out chapters 4 and 5, which take you into some of the advanced aspects of quest mastering. But if this is your first time taking on this role, I would at least get through the prologue first, because that's going to get you comfortable with a lot of the mechanics that you're going to use while you play. And if you jump right into the advanced techniques, it's going to be overwhelming. Speaking of overwhelming, I know this seems like a lot of information. This is a long video. There's a lot going on in it, but I promise you, once you play a little bit, it becomes very intuitive. It becomes natural. And I cannot stress enough, it is so worth the work that you have to put in to fill this role. It has been so rewarding. And remember, rule number 1, have fun. Don't get bogged down in the details. Keep your players engaged. If you don't remember exactly how something works, just wing it. You're the only one that gets to read from this book. So if you make something up, no one's going to know. And on that point, when you're setting up an attack, players don't know what their targets are unless you tell them, meaning they don't know what they have to roll to succeed. And sometimes it's a good idea not to tell them what they need to roll. That way you can fudge it a little bit. If you have a player that's getting discouraged or something like that, you can let something less than a perfect roll slide. Obviously, if they're terrible, if they keep rolling 2s, they're going to catch on that you're just letting them through. But if you know the target is an 8 and they roll a 7 and you know they just need a little win, maybe let the 7 slide. You're the quest master. Whatever you say goes. So go read the first 2 chapters of the Advanced Player's Guide and then skim through the prologue of the Tome of Quests before you play. I didn't do that. I didn't read the prologue first, and it made it for a really bumpy ride going through with everyone because I was constantly having to stop and check and read ahead and figure out what I was doing. Since we went through the prologue, I have at least read through. I didn't read every single word, but I skimmed through and kind of figured out the flow of the story before we played, and it was so much smoother. So once you've done that, it's time to go on a quest, and you can do this. I promise you can. And when you do, come back here and please leave a comment and let me know how it goes. I'm genuinely excited to hear people's experiences with this game, especially the people who, like us, this is your first time playing a role-playing game. And again, I'll leave the time codes to everything down in the description in case you need to go back and refresh on something. I will also leave a link to where you can find this game down there as well. And if you're not already subscribed, be sure to click that button right there. Also find the bell wherever that is and hit that because that's important. Check out some of our other videos over here, including part 1 of my parents' guide to being a quest master. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Have a fantastic time.